Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Peggy Jean, an Egyptologist, and I'm writing a children's book about ancient Egypt that I plan to illustrate myself. Here's my little sketchbook for my watercolor drawings, which I basically just use to experiment with techniques or for small individual objects. But I love the paper. The colors come out so beautifully vibrant here. And what I really appreciate is that it is a bound book, so I don't have loose sheets lying around everywhere for my many small illustrations. I put my larger drawings, which are about 20 by 30 centimeters, into a folder after they dry, but I always feel like something is missing. That's why a compact little book like this is really practical. So I'm thinking about switching to the book format for the larger sizes as well, so that later on, when I need to scan and lay out my children's book, I won't have to hunt down so many pieces. Today, though, I'd like to show you something really exciting that I've been meaning to paint for a long time. It's a part of the royal apparel that is the outwardly visible symbols of a pharaoh. I had sketched this out briefly before, but then I realized that the illustration was simply too small. However, the royal insignia are a key part of the chapter on the pharaohs in my children's book. That's why I have to paint the whole thing again. But that's okay, I love these shapes and colors. I actually rarely use this bold red here. It's quite bright, almost blood red. But what I'm painting here is the so-called Pharaoh crown. This is the crown worn by one of the earliest pharaohs known to us, named Narmer. It is a double crown. Pharaoh Narmer is known from the Narmer palette. This is a richly decorated basalt slab on which the king presents himself as a victorious ruler over his enemies. The truly fascinating thing is, on one of the sides of the palette, he wears the white crown, and on the other, the red crown. There are many other depictions like this, where a king wears both crowns on his head at the same time, and this has a very special meaning. The red crown is called Desheret and represents the north of the country, that is Lower Egypt. The white crown, Hedjet, is associated with Upper Egypt, that is the south. And in the beginning, these were actually two different countries with two kings and their own laws, and in other words, two administrative units. And certainly, this was not only bureaucratic and difficult to manage, but it also made Egypt more vulnerable to attacks from outside. That is why Narmer is the pharaoh who symbolizes the so-called unification of the empire. He united the two lands into one great Egypt. So when a king wears both crowns, he always represents himself as the unifier of the two lands. In ancient Egyptian, there is a special term for this, which I will certainly discuss here again, as it is simply essential for the complete understanding of Egyptian history and the worldview in general. It is called Sema Tawi. Sema means to unite, and Ta means the land. Tawi is the so-called jewel, and not to be confused with the plural. The jewel indicates that something exists in two forms, but not merely as two numerical units, but as counterparts, okay? Just as when you say both legs or both arms. Thus, both lands belonged together, not simply 2 or 3 or 4 countries. Two lands, both lands, Upper and Lower Egypt. They were regarded as a single entity from that time onward, and the pharaohs repeatedly strove to resolve the divisions that had arisen over the course of history and to reunite the lands. The double crown is an incredibly powerful symbol of this, and alongside the crook and the flail, the ceremonial beard and the gold and blue striped headdress, the Pharaoh crown also sends a clear message to the viewer: here stands a king. Unfortunately, no real pshent crown as a physical object has ever been found. We have no archaeological evidence of that. Crooks, flails, and even the beards to be tied around the neck can still be admired in museums today. The double crown, however, is known to us only from depictions on temple and tomb walls. Red and white are actually among the colors I've used the least so far. My little Winsor & Newton paint set here will definitely need some new blue and Van Dyck brown soon, but I hardly ever use red and white. Until now. I'm mixing in some brown and a touch of blue for contrast, and we'll see how it looks once it's dry. That can be a bit tricky with watercolors. When they are wet, they are often darker and more vibrant, and it's quite possible that they might look a bit dull once they're dry. I try to counteract that by mixing in lighter and darker shades of red. After all, we don't really know what the crown was made of. Silk didn't exist back then. The earliest evidence of trade from China, where silk originally comes from, dates back to the 21st dynasty, around 1070 BC. The white crown may have been made of linen, and the red crown very likely was as well, or perhaps from red animal hide. However, what we might perceive as a shimmer in the fabric is pure speculation. Okay? Crowns and royal headwear in general have indeed varied over the millennia. As I mentioned, in addition to the pshent crown and the Nemes headband, we also have the bag-shaped cap. Then there is the Gebresch crown, which often depicts the king as a warrior in a battle. Nefertiti, on the other hand, had her own unique style. Actually, there's so much more I could paint, but I'm not sure if I will have enough time in the end. In any case, I'm hard at work designing large background images for the book's overall layout. At the same time, I'm currently editing my manuscript. That's quite a challenge. And right now I'm only on chapter 3, and there are 8 chapters in total. And soon it will be time to put it all together. And of course, I will take you along for the ride. So, this is the result of my pshent crown. Follow me if you want to be a part of the creation of my book. I appreciate you being here, and I'd also appreciate a like. See you soon!